Good morning, all. So my name is Ben Fielding. I'm a Senior Democratic Services Officer, and I'd like to welcome everyone today of this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. I'd like to start proceedings by asking for a nomination for chairman.
Could I propose Councillor Graham Wright, please?
Okay, thank you. And are there any other nominations? Okay, on that, I would like to announce that Councillor Graham Wright is now chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, everybody. Thanks for your support. The next thing to do is to elect the vice chairman. So do we have a proposer for a vice chairman?
Yes, Chairman, I'd like to propose Chris Williams.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Read out, that's fine. Do we have anybody else, any other nominations? No, in that case, Chris, welcome once again. You are now Vice Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. Okay, so now we move on to apologies. Ben, please.
Yeah. So I can confirm that apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Joe Trigg, Ruth Hopkinson and Phil Alford. Councillor Joe Trigg has arranged for Councillor Claire Cape to attend the meeting in her absence. Thank you.
Okay, fine. We have some others which are absent as well, I think. But absent without apologies, as it were.
Yeah, so currently, as it stands, Councillor John Hubbard and Councillor Stuart Wheeler are yet to arrive to the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 4, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Has anybody got any issues with the minutes, or can I sign them off at some later date today? Everybody's okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Well, that goes without saying. Anybody has a declaration now or during the meeting, just put your hand up and we will register that declaration of interest. Don't see anybody, so that's fine. Members of the public? We don't have any members of the public wishing to partake. That's fine, thank you. So now on to agenda item 7, which is Chairman's announcements. I think this is really important. The reports of the task groups and rapid scrutiny exercises are now all going to appear on a dedicated page on the council's website. So it'll be one place where we can go and actually get all the reports. And that's not just for us, that's for members of the public as well. So it'll all be there. At some point, Ben, we don't have an opportunity to put that up to show where it is at lastminute.com from me. Yeah, we'll work on that and we might just flash that up in a minute just to get an idea of what's visibly there. Thanks, Ben. And whilst we do that, well, hang on, we can wait a second or two. Yes, Pip.
Can I just ask, will the public have access to them? Because do you want that for the financial planning task group, which is not one that the public can attend?
It's all the reports. So you send a report.
That's all right.
Yeah, you send a report to us.
Just
that
checking.
report will be there. No, that's fine. Might have been a good idea had I thought of this before. Don't worry, Ben, if it's not doable. Sorry?
Come back to it.
We'll come back to it at some point when we've got it hooked up. Okay, let's move on then, if we may, to the service devolution and asset transfer policy update. Agenda supplement 1, we have the update on the implementation of the council service devolution and asset transfer policy. This was adopted by Cabinet September 2022, following the input from a rapid scrutiny exercise commissioned by our committee In endorsing the rapid scrutiny's report, the committee also scheduled an update. So if you remember, it was a little bit contentious when we had the report. We had a lot to say, and we asked for it to come back. And I think it might be quite disappointing that Ruth can't actually be here today, but hopefully she's briefed you with some questions. So over to Richard. I think Philip, the cabinet member's not here, is he? So he's absent. So Richard and Andy, were you happy to give us a report, please?
I can give you a very brief report. As you'll see from the report you've had, there aren't vast amounts to add at the moment. Yes, Phil isn't able to be here. We are progressing with Westbury, who are extremely keen. That is being used as a trial to take this new process forward. There has been some engagement. Warminster are talking about the idea. I gather we've got a couple of small villages interested, but at the moment we're going to let the Westbury element proceed. Historically, we found it's far easier to deal with one town really at a time rather than dealing with multiple towns at once. That's caused confusion. And then once we're down the road a bit with Westbury, we're at the point where we're sort of able to say, we know what we're doing there, we'll then move on to the next town. I'm not sure there's a great deal more to add. I don't know if Andy wants to.
Thanks, Richard.
We're probably going to have a coughing fit now, so yeah, I'll move to questions and I'll get some water. Sorry.
Perhaps I was going to suggest that as you're the member for Westbury, yeah, would you like to come in?
Yeah, Richard, Westbury are very happy to be the pilot for the next stage. Although I would say with a little bit of apprehension, meeting with officers later in this week. So we're looking forward to that. The new policy is somewhat different to the old policy. Has a number of more liabilities attached with it, but nevertheless, we firmly believe that that localism here is out trumps the disbenefits, really. Thank you.
Are you fully charged?
Yeah, ready to go, Chair. Thank you. So it was just to add about some of the reality in terms of the policy. So and it's in the report, and just to add context to that. So we held a town and parish conference back in May last year, based on the old policy, saying that we were moving things forward. Excuse me. And then we followed that through in terms of when the new policy was put in to follow up that engagement. So it's in the report, but the new policy sets out some minimum assets and services that have to be delegated or transferred, and so that has it's turned a number of councils off in terms of their willingness, but without doubt the economic conditions that the country is facing, and therefore some of the councils have said that their focus is in other areas at this point in time. That doesn't mean that, of course, in the future they'll come back to it. But some of the other issues is been where we've been looking at potential deals to progress. That because the indication from that town council is a potential pick and choose of either services or assets rather than the minimum, we have chosen not to progress those discussions with those town and parishes. So where we are trialling Westbury, they've shown an indication to meet the criteria for the new policy and to have those discussions, and we'll be actually having conversations this week with the town council to progress those and understand the appetite of that. But that has obviously from a number of other councils that have shown interest, that minimum criteria has not necessarily where they would have liked to have been, and I think it's only fair to reflect that. But that does, from my perspective, mean that we can focus our resource that we have got on progressing this deal, and then that can lead on to the next deal, because as the leader has said, we have another town councils that still want to meet the minimum criteria and move forward with deals in the future. But the other aspect is the money that was the one-off money that was put forward to enable the progression of this policy will in large be potentially eaten up by one or two deals. So rather than just do one or two deals and that's it, we're trying to then put in with the trial with Westbury, there will be a saving that will come forward to this council. Obviously, the town council will need to sort their finances out to be able to take on any services and assets that they look to undertake through that deal. But the savings generated from this will then help sustain the programme for future town councils rather than just one and done, because that's the resources finished. We can then actually put in a trial that sustains the programme for any future town councils that then come forward and want to do the deals. You've got, and that's briefly the update that's in the report, but I just wanted to context where we're currently at with at this moment in time with the policy and the current progression with that deal.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Andy. And I had a series of questions which you rather neatly answered, which was, how many are we going to conclude? What's the future looking like? And I think you've described it really well as to where we are. And we'll look forward to Westbury flying the flag and seeing how it comes. Do you want to add anything as to why Westbury want to move forward, Gordon?
Well, Westbury, Andy said we need to get our finances in order. We did that quite some time ago. And in fact, we've been saving up and putting things in earmarked reserves. I remember having long conversations with Alistair Cunningham, remember him, ages ago about, Westbury being considered very much so. We were actually quite taken aback that others were considered before we were, even though we've done most of the work. And so this is something that we wanted to do for a long time. As I said earlier on, we really believe that the decisions which affect our town should be taken as close as possible to the place where those decisions should be made, and that we should have the ability to shape and present Westbury in a way that we want Westbury to be presented rather than what other people might want Westbury to be presented. And there is much work to be done, and we're quite willing to do it, providing the deal is favourable.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Does anybody else have any questions? Claire?
Thank you very much. And this isn't feedback from Ruth, I'll hasten to add. And thank you very much for the update here. That's really helpful. I just wondered, presumably, if Westbury is the pilot, what is the opportunity for the learning from that pilot to inform the next one? Because I don't think I got really a sense of that from the update. Would you be able to help us with that? That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're already taking some learning from that in terms of the asset list that we've put together, and we're sharing with Westbury. So we are, if you remember from the policy, we've excluded certain things from the policy. So we can have discussions with the town council around an asset list that has been already refined from our perspective. Now, of course, the town council are interested in things potentially beyond that, and so we've learned from that in terms of going, rather than this policy, there's here's the assets under the policy, but here's the assets, and these are the reasons why we've excluded them. But there's more of a wider discussion that just through the lens of that policy. So there's learning there for the next town council to say, okay, discussions through this policy, these are the assets that we're talking about. But there's all these other assets that currently Wiltshire Council operate from or own, but they're excluded under that policy, because there could be a wider discussion to be had, but that should therefore be driven from the town rather than driven from our perspective. This is the policy. There are also other things coming out about nuances on the policy around, and you also, I know we'll be having a discussion with Westbury about legal costs for parcels of land that we would potentially transfer over, and so we are using Westbury. but with the discussion with them to potentially refine some of the parameters around the policy around those, because I've got no interest in landing a town council with significant costs. Each parcel of land will come with a transfer agreement and detailed agreement, and you could say, well, that's £1,000 legal fees per piece, and if you've got 20 pieces of land, you know, it's going to get prohibitive to that town council. So let's be sensible about how we approach that, but then set that in train so Westbury can then lead the way for the other town councils to say this is what we've agreed, and that's the approaches of it. So there's some learning there, and equally about the size of land. So there's a sizable piece of land that we've actually, it was ambiguous in the policy in terms of we will only consider small pieces of land, define small pieces of land. So we're beginning to have those conversations and understanding. Again, different towns will probably have different views around that, but we're beginning to map that out. Of course, this is town council led in terms of their aspirations and what they want to take on. So they might have a different view, but with them beginning to define aspects of the policy. And there might be, whether this is an operational matter or whether we come back and revise the policy to say, with Westbury, we've done X, Y, and Z from the learning around that. And then how we approach it with the next town council is not be so potentially kind of blinkered in terms of we're trying to have this aspect, but the town council want a wider discussion about other things. So we're trying to do that as part of the process.
Thank you very much. If I may just, that's really helpful. So there's definitely an opportunity to come back and look at the policy again in response to the learnings that you're going to have, no doubt. Great, thank you.
Thanks very much, Claire. Tony, you've always been fairly vocal on this subject. Have you got a question or a statement, please?
Just a statement, really. It's good to see that Westbury's actually got to the stage of actually negotiation. Just to let council know that we'll probably have a new member of staff, a director of services, after next week, as our one gentleman is leaving on Friday, and hopefully from now on we might be able to sort of renegotiate with council on terms, because Carl has really been sort of looking to help and go forward on asset transfers for the last sort of so many years. There may have been a bit of obstructive views from our director of services that we've had in place for 1 year, and we may see some changes. So I really want to look forward to see how Westbury work with Andy and the team, just to see how we can actually now go forward rather than a step backwards. So yeah, good to see a move from Westbury, and hopefully we'll keep an eye on that and see how we work forward. So thank you, Graham, for allowing me to speak on that.
Not a problem. Thank you, Tony. I think Gordon might just want to conclude.
Yeah, I think what gave Westbury strength really was the conversations that it had and the consultations that took place with other towns, devisers, for instance, Chippenham and Salisbury, as to their experiences going forward, and you know, that did give us heart. Lots and lots of warnings and red flags, but nevertheless, you know, that's part of the negotiation. So we look forward to it, as I said in the very beginning, with trepidation.
Thanks very much, Gordon. It does seem like there is a way forward here, which is going in a positive vein. Jerry, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Across the whole county, I think under the old historical districts, there are lots of tiny little parcels of land dotted around all over the county. And funny enough, yesterday I visited a gentleman who purchased the show home in the old hospital site. Alongside the show home in 2003 was a tiny parcel of land which was laid out for amenity space. Never ever got maintained. He's been maintaining it since 2003. He approached me yesterday with a chance of saying, well, if I had to hedge against it, no one's ever used it, could he perhaps buy it? So he approached the parish council. They thought it was theirs, and then they discovered it wasn't. It belongs to Wiltshire Council. So he said to me, well, how could I go about purchasing it? He said, because I don't think I'm going to get any response. I said, well, quite interesting enough, we've got this asset transfer thing going on today. I said, I'll inquire. I said, but my view as a councillor, not sort of being greedy, was that if he was to purchase this tiny parcel of land that he's maintained for the last 17 years, I said, if you ever decide to sell that for something else, I think we'd be quite interested in having a bit of an uplift in the value of the land. But I don't know how that would fall, but there are lots of parcels of land around, littered around, and there's a lot of what you call them the old ransom strips in a lot of areas. So is that still a possibility for someone like that who's been maintaining ground for a long time to be able to purchase off the council?
Bottom line, yes, because we would just need to make an assessment of whether there is a ransom strip or value to us as a landowner. And we have got a number of ransom strips around the county, but we've also got a large number of these small plots of land that either we're having to maintain in some way, or members of the public, because they're adjoining their property, are maintaining. But so where the conditions are right in terms of exactly what you described, there's always legal fees involved. And so I'll be saying to the person who wants to buy it, you pay the legal fees, and then we'll look to get rid, because there's no point in us owning these small bits of land. But again, I'll just caveat it in terms of, I know that there are small strips of land that are ransom strips and therefore are high value and strategic pieces to the council, and we will obviously protect those to the nth degree.
Thanks, Chair, for that. But I have got a video of it. I'll show you afterwards.
Richard.
And just adding on that, of course, if it's large enough to build a house on, we'd look at it for a council house first. Interestingly on that, the bit where it gets really confusing is bits of land that no one knows who they own. And I've got tiny bits of land in one of my villages. No one has a clue who owns them. And it can get really quite complicated at that point. So if we definitively own it, that should make it easy. But these can be a very frustrating mess.
Okay, with no more questions then, that takes us to a proposal, which is to note the update of the implementation of the council service devolution and asset transfer policy. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Chris. All those in favour? Great, unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 9 now, which is the quarterly performance risk 2022-23. On page 15 of the agenda pack, we have the latest report providing an update on performance against the stated missions of the Council's Business Plan 2022 to 32, its strategic risks and proposed future developments. The report was considered by Cabinet on the 2nd of May. While the report presents the key high-level performance indicators, I am aware that Children's Select Committee reviews performance indicators within its remit via its standing task group. In addition, Health Select Committee will be considering proposals regarding its approach to performance scrutiny at its meeting on the 8th of June. I look forward to future updates on how this work is going. And Jerry, we may need to have a chat about, the Environment Select as well and the future. So we have Councillor Richard Cluer, Leader of the Council, here to introduce the report. Over to you, Richard.
I think I might let Perry do most of the talking here. If I give you just from the council perspective or cabinet perspective, my summary, we're now at a point where this is close to a finished article. We've spent a fair amount of time, as I always said we would, looking at metrics. Some have come in, some have come out. There is still some consistency of data that needs working on. I want annual rolling averages rather than monthly averages. Monthly averages just honestly don't make sense. I want it to be consistent in the way we're looking at information. And if we're looking at an entire year, as long as that year moves month by month, we're still comparing like with like. I think that's really important. I think the risk elements are good now. I wouldn't have said that 18 months ago. I'm still not convinced that SEND can't be mitigated against as our top risk, but we've questioned it, we've challenged it. And we're now using this from a cabinet perspective to have our own sort of deeper dives to understand some of what's going on collectively, providing it that sort of assurance at a cabinet and corporate leadership level as well, which was the last element that I'd envisaged of this process. So it's now up and running properly. Take any questions on any of the details, but I don't know if Perry wants to run through.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. And you did explain, and we did have this through at cabinet. But having said that, this is the scrutiny panel. So Perry, if you'd like to give us an overview or any ideas and comments, we'd be grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, just to say, as the leader has said, this has developed, so I appreciate that's made your job a little bit more difficult because the documentation and the information we're providing has shifted slightly. So you've got the covering report, you've got the 2 appendices. In the appendices about performance, you'll see that we've tried to help by showing you with a red word new and an exclamation mark where those new measures are in place. So just to pick a few on page 3, you can now see percentage of children in care fostered within local authority provision. That's remained stable through a difficult period. Perhaps an issue close to everybody's heart. Page 4, you've got percentage of potholes repaired within 24 hours, and note there the 400% increase in the number of potholes reported. So that's people, that's place, and then I suppose into the corporate centre, you can see on page 5 that we've now got a new measure saying how engaged our residents are. So we have 28,000 residents that we send our newsletter to, and we have really strong performance there, 55% open rate. Compare that to government e-newsletters, 28%, and average across the country, 21%. We must be doing something right there. There are other examples for members to see, but we've tried to give you a richer picture, and as Richard has said, that's been a developing piece. And then in terms of risk, we've tried to distill down those risks that are of significance across the council from a huge list, 224 that are managed across the council by colleagues, 224 across our different directorates, and to give you, I think, the top 14. And again, happy to take questions on those or on performance information, which, as you say, Chair, is also considered at our specific Opium Scrutiny committees as well.
Okay, thank you, Perry. I wasn't going to bring up potholes, but as you mentioned the word, my experience is disappointing. I know this has got nothing to do with the report, but I would like to know whether we, these figures are arbitrary, of course. Are we repairing 100 potholes a day and getting 120 reported, or is it the other way round, in which case we're winning? All I can say is in my ward, I've got, which I would class the important large potholes that are not being repaired, and it's doing absolutely nothing for my street cred whatsoever, or Wiltshire Council's. But I'm sure that we're on it, and I know that I do believe that the leader has asked for more resource to go into it. Well, that's what I was told this morning. So he might want to comment on that, but that I digress slightly, but I guess that's a feeling that we all have at the moment, and it really is bad news for us. Having said that, do we have, and it's very much down to the select committees. Sadly, John isn't with us today, John Hubbard, so I'm sure he would have given us an idea of what he was going to look at. I don't know whether anybody has a question. Don't know whether, Johnny, did you want to add anything as to where you see your select committee may go with this, and perhaps Jerry as well, because it's very much whilst it's in our overview and scrutiny management arena, it's very much a select committee opportunity for scrutiny. So do you have anything you want to add? Don't feel you have to, but Jerry, yes, Jerry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry to go on about potholes, but the area board last night at Pusey, we had an urgent item come up, and my other 2 fellow members registered their dismay in the fact that they think the far east of Wiltshire is not being treated as fairly as anywhere else relating to potholes, the A342 and the B3087. I said I will raise it with the Cabinet for Highways. You are also. I think it's just difficult, the fact that the weather's been really bad and it's been unusual. We're not the only county, we're not alone. But turning off of that one slightly, on the accommodation, I think it's number 43, what's caused a 70% rise in households in temporary accommodation? Because can you explain some of the actions being taken to mitigate the number of households in temporary accommodation? Because it's very worrying to me. And I said I've raised it at Cabinet about the fact that we're losing social housing to sale, but there's quite a dramatic rise in our area as well.
Thanks. If I take, well, there are 2 issues there. If we start with potholes, broadly at the moment, from the evidence I'm getting, we are just about keeping up with the potholes being reported. but we've had such a bad winter that means we're actually, as they come through, we're fixing the potholes that were reported last month, or yeah, it is about last month now if I look at the ones that I'm encountering. But that means the potholes that have emerged since then, and they are still emerging at quite a frightening rate, it means there is a backlog generated there. I have asked for more resource to be put in and to get on with trying to tackle proper repairs to potholes at speed. We've done a lot of patching over the winter. Some of that patching is cold patching. Some of it will hold up. Let's be honest, much of it will need more significant warm repairs done now that the weather's improved. So yes, we are looking at making effective use right now of the extra, whatever, 3.6 million that government gave us specifically for potholes. We're also looking at how we adjust, because you're already seeing, we're already starting to get rather a warm a bit of summer, and we're in spring. If we get this same pattern of weather that we are expecting of warmer summers, and then winters that aren't consistently cold but have a lot of freeze thaw in them, we're only going to see more issues with our roads, and therefore we're going to need to adjust the way in which we are trying to deal with them in advance. We're going to have to do something around prevention. That's pretty much everything we're doing. Prevention is critical. We need to apply that logic to potholes as well, and lots of discussions are going on about that. Temporary accommodation. The reason temporary accommodation has increased is because the number of people on the housing register has gone up significantly, and because, let's be blunt, the private rental market is now broken, completely broken. If you look at private rental properties across Wiltshire, the last time I looked would have been late last week. Not that I'm obsessive, but I seem to do it at least once a week now. Salisbury, there were 32 properties for rent, private rent in Salisbury. Of those, about a third were already closed to any new viewings, because basically they had more than enough people lined up to look at them. And about a third were retirement type properties, which actually, despite the fact that rents look quite good when you add on the service charges, have all sorts of their own problems with them. The rest of them were really expensive. So that is causing pressures on housing in a way that we've not had before. We used to be able to find local housing allowance affordable properties across Wiltshire, much of Wiltshire, never in the villages, but normally in the towns. They're just not there now. So that means we've got more people who are needing housing, and it's harder to house them. That means we're seeing, for the first time in the creation of Wiltshire Council, the fact we're having to use B&B accommodation at some points for people who need temporary housing. I am not willing to let that happen. It's not good. There's no way I'm having children going into B&B accommodation. So we released £10 million at last budget, and that is being leveraged from reserves. That's being leveraged up. And one of the tasks that we've given our officers there is to acquire more temporary accommodation so that we're able to meet that demand without having to rely on B&Bs. We're not expecting that demand to ease off anytime soon. It's perhaps being exacerbated through the Ukrainian scheme, but we now have the first properties that have been bought and have Ukrainians in, and there's a significant pipeline there that will address that. But we've got to make sure we've got a greater stock of temporary accommodation to help ease that flow. I'm giving a really comprehensive answer, but I think it's worth giving you. The other problem we've got then is on the void length time. The entire affordable housing sector is having issues with void lengths because of workforce shortages. And so you're seeing the speed with which housing is coming through from affordable housing has been, we've had a bad year on it. We're probably at a point where it's not getting any worse now, and it's starting to get a little bit better. But that's increased that problem in terms of not enough people moving into those new properties quickly enough. We're dealing with that in terms of we've got apprentices coming on with our own workforce to make sure voids are turned around more quickly. But it's part of the picture that's created that issue that we have now around around temporary accommodation. If I had to say, I think the rental market is the primary problem. That's what's changed significantly. We used to have higher numbers, we used to be able to deal with them. But you just don't have that ability to move people into private rented. You've got to rely on housing stock, and it's making it that much harder.
If I could just come back on that. Is there any evidence that some of these private landlords are ratcheting the rent up £200-300 a month on these people, forcing them into either being unable to pay and then being evicted, then I think it is against the spirit of thing, all right, whether it's legitimate or not. If they evict those people just to get them out of the house so they can get someone else in there that can afford to pay the rent. I don't know if anybody else has experienced it, but I have had one case in my area. But I was fortunate enough to find another place for them privately for one of my customers. But I was lucky on that occasion. But is that happening? I've seen it happening in Bristol, so I'm just wondering if it's happening in this area as well at this moment in time.
Nationally, undoubtedly, I will criticise government for a second here because I think it's honest to. Government reforms around no-fault evictions, and no-fault evictions can be a real problem, but because government are not addressing this issue of the ability of landlords to increase rent, which is another way of creating a no-fault eviction, I think if anything, government's direction of travel has the potential to make this worse. I'm hoping that will be addressed at the committee stages of the bill that's just been announced there, because there needs to be the right balance. I think it is definitely happening. I'm hearing about cases of it. I don't have empirical evidence at the moment. It's anecdotal.
Okay, Pip.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I was glad to hear the leader say that about the bill going through Parliament, because I actually think that will make the situation worse. They're not going to be able to evict, however bad. They also are likely, if they can't put the rents up, to simply sell and I'm not sure, and I hesitate to criticise our glorious government, but I'm not sure that bill is going to actually do much except exacerbate the situation. And that's very worrying. I read it through very carefully, and the general premise of it is it's going to make the situation worse. So thank you, Chair, but I'm glad the leader commented on that.
And I will make sure we get our own representation in on that front. And I'm already doing that informally through the links I've got. I was incredibly depressed on reading that because I think it will make Wiltshire's problems much worse, not better. It may work elsewhere in the country, but I want something to work for Wiltshire.
Councillor Trotman.
Yeah, thank you. As Richard knows, our town has gone through some unprecedented sort of issues lately, and we've actually bought three properties, and we're actually put as private rentals. Those rentals are slightly increased on the usual, but as Calne Town Council may well be able to contain those rentals with the people. But one thing I'd just like to bring up, we have a crisis fund in our town, and we've suddenly had the arrival of some asylum seekers in Calne, which have actually taken over some of the private rentals that we were hoping to put families into. This has been a difficult issue. I'm just wondering how Wiltshire Council deals with some of the funding issues with the asylum seekers, because they seem to be in the town wandering about asking for funds, as they've only got sort of £45 a week from the government. Does Wiltshire Council help in any of these sort of issues? I know it's a difficult one to answer, perhaps, but we're put in a position where we, through our precept with a crisis fund, are having to help some of them. And I'm just in an awkward position of knowing how to deal with some of those items.
Sorry, Chair, we're getting some very interesting questions that need quite technical responses, but if you bear with me.
Yeah.
If we break asylum seekers down from a council perspective into, let's say, 3 areas. You've got the Afghans, where we've found it we've had a number in the asylum hotel. We found it very difficult to persuade them to move into the accommodation that was brought forward. They wanted to be in more metropolitan areas with a larger Afghan population around them. That's proved difficult because of the issues cities have. Government are now forcing their hand there. We've got properties available in that scheme, so I'm not concerned about that element, very small. We've then got the Ukrainian scheme, where we are looking to acquire properties to using the funds we've got, both broadly from government and specifically from government, to house Ukrainians, but that's buying properties, it's not messing around with the rental market. That is well in hand. There are over 90 in train at the last time. I'm waiting for an update this week, but it was 90, and I think we've got the first 2 families now in, and that will only speed up from here. So we've got elements in place to address that. The private rental market for those Ukrainians who are on universal credit, it simply isn't there because you've got the issues around none of them are able to meet local housing allowance. So we've got to come up with solutions. What you're talking about is a different group, I believe, which would be essentially illegal asylum seekers if they're receiving the government funding on the basis you've said. We have no duty to house them. Government are housing in asylum hotels, and then when they move on to asylum hotels, whilst their cases are being processed, it's pretty sporadic, pretty haphazard as to how housing will work, and it is very often in city areas. So it's not something where we've got additional funding or additional support because it's not one of the recognised schemes for bringing people in. The moment they have indefinite leave to remain, yes, they would then have recourse to public funds. But until they have recourse to public funds, it isn't a duty that falls on us, and it's not something we would be able, given the rest of the 4,500 people on the housing waiting list we've got, to be intervening in that area. But it's not one that we get a great deal of in Wiltshire because people tend, in those situations, tend to be in more urban areas for whatever reason. We do have the asylum hotel, but when people are moved on from there, it isn't somewhere else in Wiltshire.
Thank you, Richard. Claire?
Through you, Chair, thanks very much. Can I just check? You said illegal asylum seekers. I don't believe it's illegal to seek asylum. I think there may be two different.
I think you find it's government definition. People who cross the channel illegally are classed by government as illegal asylum seekers and processed through one route. There are legal routes for applying for asylum, and people who do that will come here with recourse to public funds, and therefore, from a council perspective, it's a different set of funding.
So if we're granting them £45, then presumably they're asylum seekers, not illegal. Is that correct?
It would suggest if someone's on the government receipt of that government funding, it would suggest they have come here through a route that means their asylum has not yet been processed, probably almost certainly an illegal route, that their asylum case will be being processed. And until it's processed, they don't have recourse to public funds. So one to take up with MPs.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just didn't want people listening into this to have the wrong impression of what was being said.
I think we need to be really clear about the different groups and government define them, not us.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, Tony?
Right out.
Thanks, Chair. Oh, yeah. Couple of questions, if I may. Paragraphs 26 and 39. On 20, at the ESC, we heard that there was going to be a scheme to trial opening leisure centres on public holidays. I wouldn't want any figures about increased attendance to be skewed by this. And secondly, congratulations on the progress on stopping smoking. I wonder whether or not we should include vaping as a measure to be monitored. Many thanks.
Thanks, Tony. Fortunately, we have the Cabinet member with us, Ian Blair-Penning, who's going to answer your first question, I think.
Sorry, I just picked up at the end of that. Could I ask before I answer it, what particularly is the question or concern?
Just that if public holidays are used to open leisure centres, there may be an increase in attendance.
So I'm still not clear what the point is, but let me be clear what we're doing. One or two, Councillor Jackson in particular, have been lobbying that we open leisure centres on bank holidays. The track record from the past and experience in other councils is that it is not cost effective to do that. And then you've got added to that, never mind whether it would be cost effective in terms of usage or not, we already have difficulties in staff and we're having to juggle and manage that. But nonetheless, we are reacting to that request and arranging for a trial in a number of centres this August bank holiday.
Thank you, Ian. Is Durrington one, do you know?
I'll let you know when I know.
Okay, thank you very much.
To respond on the smoking, I mean, the smoking figure is one that public health are being required to monitor. We're hearing more about concern around vaping, but only really with children, and it's more around illegal or non-licensed vaping products. So it's something that we can check with public health, but at the moment there is no requirement to restrict vaping. It's legal, and it's legal without government programs in place to sort of say pull it back, reduce it. So I don't think there'd be data available for us on it. I do think there is something around under 18s where it is illegal to vape, and potentially some of the issues coming out there. If the studies, and I think there was a further one released today talking about lead and nickel being found in vaping products, I suspect that'll go up the public health radar very quickly if that's the case. I don't know if that study is accurate. BBC were reporting something.
Happy with that, Tony?
Well, indeed, but in response to vaping being legal, so is smoking. So my concern is not whether it's legal or illegal. My concern is for public health.
Okay, fine, thank you. Any more questions? Oh, Perry wants to come back. Yes, Perry.
Yeah, just to complement the commentary from Councillor Bear Pilling, if members look at the figures for leisure centre visits, it's actually the number of membership card swipes and walk-in payments. So I don't think it refers to the issue that Councillor Jackson has raised, but we can obviously keep an eye on that.
Okay, super, thank you. I don't appear to have any more questions, but I just want to take this opportunity to direct the select committee chairs and vice chairs who are here to remember that, you know, quarterly performance and risk is very much OSMC, but there is an opportunity for you guys to look at the performance and risk within Environment Select and to look at finance and contracts as well, you know, and how we do that. We need to progress that at our next opportunity when we get together. So we will be having an update from the chairs' meetings, and we'll talk at it then. Yes, sorry, Gordon first.
Yeah, unless I read it wrongly, you know, from the Health Select point of view, you know, the figures greatly in the risk register itself, most of the health things, but in the measures, the first appendix, it's not present. You know, is there, or very rarely present, is there a plan to put more health-related stats into the measures? There are public health measures and one or two others, but there's nothing about reablement or figures of, you know, people going to homes or things like that, unless I read it wrongly.
I think we're straying here into the confusion we have, confusion with the integrated care system developing its metrics. And I think when I chair the integrated care partnership, one of the things I am pushing for as chair of the partnership now we've got a strategy is to get some clear metrics around those really critical, not hospital specific, but system specific measures. I think when we get those, I would want to be considering how we input them into our own metrics on a Wiltshire level. But right now, the NHS is awash with information. I'm not sure much of it could be classed as serious data. It's a lot of statistics, but when you start trying to get to the level of providing a metric that gives you a so what behind it, it gets very confused very quickly. Those are discussions we're having through the Integrated Care Board, and as we see that being shaped, we will work out how we plug it in. From a reablement perspective, we almost certainly could. We had discussed reablement, and I cannot for the life of me remember, and I really do need to get glasses to read the micro text I've got in front of me here. But I'm sure we have reablement in there now.
Where?
Oh gosh, we added it in the last line, and I'm just trying to work out where.
I heard another voice.
Page 25, apparently. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, it is. It's the percentage of people in their own homes 91 days after entering reopenment. So there have been a number of these metrics added from a council perspective, but there is definitely more work to do. And the one I really want to see from the NHS side is around prevention, and how prevention is going to work at an ICB level and how that can plug in to our own level.
It's not in the first 10 pages of the
Yeah.
Appendix 1.
Yes, it is. It's on page 25. It's a new
But how
metric.
can
That's,
there's only 10 pages.
that's page 25 of the report as it's coming up from the online system. Page 3 of the pages. So it is in there. There are a whole raft of health metrics that have come in.
Page 25.
Oh, I see, I see.
Okay.
Yes,
Yes, Chris.
different, that's right.
I think it's rather fascinating the way we can delve into these and sort of ask the questions that we are asking. But I also feel that there may be a few of our numbers, and I'm going to include myself in one of them, is that it would be good to have maybe a little workshop or something on actually how to interpret and how to look at these figures to get the best out of them. Because what we're doing at the moment is maybe some of us for the first time looking at these, and because somebody else is asking a question on it, that's a good point. But just looking at it as a whole, it is I'm not going to say it's not difficult, but I would like a better understanding of what I'm looking at to then ask the questions relevant to our meeting. So I think it'd be a very good idea if somebody could lead us on that at the time, to get the best out of it.
Absolutely, Chris. And as Vice Chair, you could take that as an action to arrange some training through Henry, perhaps. Yeah, and I'm sure that we'd be, I'm sure the leader and, Perry would be happy to walk us through, because the more we understand, the better we are all off, the better we do scrutiny, etc. We're quite happy to do that. We could do it at a pre-meeting if you prefer, but I'm quite happy to do it online, because that makes life easier for all of us. Okay, I did see your hand up. Sorry, Pip and then Claire.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate what you've said. I think this is the start of something. But the one thing, you could have a very good, what's this called, scorecard for a service that when we look at the financial figures is hopelessly over budget, and we'd want to know. So you have to balance the two. We shall be looking at financial planning will be looking at the finance figures that go with this when we get them, which presumably will be period 12 year end. But it is very important you don't confuse the two issues, because it's very nice to sit here and say, doesn't that look good and doesn't that look bad and all the rest of it. And then you get a finance report that says it's 5 million over budget and something has to be done about it or something has to be moved. So I think it's a much broader picture, and it would be nice eventually if on this report that could be in the comments, or somehow it could indicate whether the performance not only is good, but they've also been within budget. But I don't know, Perry wants to speak on that, but that's just a point I'm making, that you can't actually, unless you're doing the whole picture, actually say something is good, bad or indifferent.
No, I take that point, and that's where I was making the fact that select committees, we need to be looking broader across everything and relating back to everything else. But Perry wants to come in.
I think Andy wants to come in as well. So I'll just say that if you remember, it was our aim, and I think we achieved it twice, to get to both Cabinet and then to scrutiny here, the report on the business plan and how the business plan is going, performance, risk, and then obviously Andy's budgetary information, so quarters 1, 2 and 3. So what that was then enabling, is what Pip has referred to, is to understand how we're spending the money, where we're spending it, what impact that's having, and what are the risks that would prevent us doing all those things and delivering the Cabinet's business plan. We haven't managed it for quarter 4 because the information, the financial information, takes just that little bit longer to get to outturn than it does at quarters 1, 2 and 3. So we will achieve that most of the time. I think we'll almost always struggle at this time of year for the reasons that Andy's about to explain why it's that little bit more tricky to get the outturn out.
Thank you, Perry. Yes, Andy.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. The outturn information is coming to Cabinet in July from the finances. Kind of, Pip, you're quite right. Your suggestion is that balanced scorecard overview in terms of what our workforce is doing, our risks, our performance, our finances. And we may well be having good performance, but we might be blowing the budget. You're quite right. But that might be a political decision to do that, of course, as well. If something is performance-wise is off kilter with the Cabinet's business plan priorities, then more money might be thrown at it, and that's a policy decision. Now this is getting established. The linkages between the outturn report, just as Perry is saying, ideally going forward, the two would come together and they would complement each other. Now, you could do that in the finance report in terms of saying reason we're overspending is because if you look at this performance, we've put more money into whatever it is in terms of that performance. So that we begin as officers to link the two, so it's more easy for exactly what you've just described, having that balanced overview of the position. And equally from a performance and risk reporting, we can also link in the other way as well. So from a finance, I'm conscious that the outturn report is a beefy document. Let's not beat around the bush. There's a lot of detail around there, but from reading it from a councillor and from a public perspective, so talking in the detail of why there's been a variance on that service, but then also linking it into the performance, it's much more than just the pound sign in an outturn report. But we are on that trail in terms of that, because previously this is something that's been put into place this year, and we can build upon that and quite rightly make those links that you're describing.
Thanks, Andy. That's a very helpful. Richard, did you want to conclude, please?
Just following on from that, I think from a Cabinet perspective, because of the frequency with which financial issues are looked at, we've probably got that understanding. I think from a scrutiny perspective, building the metrics in would make a lot of sense, because there isn't that constant flow, and you need to be able to see it in a single report. With perhaps an element of caution, there'll be a fair amount of explanation in. So potholes will be impacted by government funding, for example, rather than our own, because we get the money through from central government. So it's going to add to the reading when it happens, but yes, it's probably the final part of that puzzle.
A final word from the Vice Chair, Chris.
Thanks. The first line here, we've got 59 indicators on this. Will they remain the same, or can we see some drop out and new ones come in? Because I should think the actual scorecard for the council is a lot bigger than what we've got here.
Chair, through you, it is our aim now to try and hold to the 59. There may be things that drop in and out. We'll tell you when that happens. There's been an iterative process throughout this first kind of year of getting to where we are that's made it that bit more fluid than is helpful for members. And we will, so I think it's right that we try and pause at this point. You're absolutely right, though, Councillor Williams, that if you go to any performance and outcome board in any part of the council now, there will be hundreds of bits of information that are shared by officers with Cabinet members to show how we're doing. So this is very much a distilled version of a lot of other information that members are getting. And but we'll try and keep that high level, as I say, to try and show you what's being delivered and how much it's costing to deliver it and what impact that's making for our residents, which the last time I checked is why you're all here.
Yes, Pip.
Thank you. That's between Perry and Andy. They probably put it much better than I could, but that is the aim eventually, to marry all three together, which we're working towards. So thank you for explaining it so the committee can understand.
Yeah, thanks, and it is good. I mean, that's what scrutiny is for. So, and this committee is the overview of all the scrutiny we do within Wiltshire Council. So I think that's been a really good debate, actually. Thank you very much for everybody who's taken part. I would like to move to a proposal. Sorry, Claire, my apologies.
Oh, it's absolutely fine, Chair, and thank you very much. And Pip outlined the need for a balanced scorecard, and absolutely commend the work that's been done so far on this. I think it's absolutely the right direction travel. I would love to see that more balanced scorecard approach in the fullness of time. I absolutely get it's a huge amount of work to do that. I just do have one, and I did want to say as well, it's seeing the variation over time is absolutely key to this. And as we move forward, we'll get longer period of time to see and understand the picture much more. And unless there's a so what to all of these indicators, then why would we have them? So yeah, great. There's one tiny comment. It says in this direction of travel, I think that means the goal is in this direction. I wondered if there's a tweak to that direction of travel, because it looks like it's saying direction of travel down when it's going up, or vice versa. So whether there was a way to just express that the direction of the goal is down or up might just make it easier to interpret. But as I say, commendable progress. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks.
Thank you, Claire. I think Richard wants to answer that.
Sorry, I'll try and be really brief. It can get a bit tricky because sometimes you want the direction of travel to be down, and that's a good thing. Therefore, it'll be a blue arrow going down. Sometimes going up's a good thing. Sometimes we don't have a goal. We may have a target, but the goal could be never ending. We want everyone to be using leisure centres or being active. So it's really hard to come up with a single way of, we've tried it. You just can't do it. I'm sorry. There's going to be some blurring in there.
Not at all, not at all. It's been a good question. So now I'm going to move then to a proposal, which is one, to note the updates and outturns against the measures and activities described against the Council's priorities and targets, and for the measures which will be included in the performance report. Two, to note the strategic risk register issues and emerging risks. And three, to explore the opportunity of delivering performance and risk training for OSMC, including the background to and the interpretation of the indicators. Do I have a seconder? Chris? All those in favour? Fine, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 10, which is the Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report. Well, I did a 9.5-minute session at full council last week. I think it was last week. It seems longer than that. I'm sure it was last week. It's on page 43. The report provides a summary of everything we've done, all that's been involved. And I must say yet again, I need to thank everybody who has been involved in that, from officers, specifically scrutiny, down to all of the people who've taken the opportunity to help us with scrutiny over the past year. So do we have any comments on that at all? No, in that case, I'm going to note the Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report of 2022-23 and move on to agenda item 11, which is the Overview and Scrutiny Member Remuneration Fund allocation. I've got a little bit of a script here because it was made quite clear last year that we can't vote on this because in actual fact, there's too many of us who have an interest or could have an interest. So what I've done is, and any queries that Simon wrote the report, we can ask Simon if there are any queries and he'll be able to help us hopefully. But I have a little script here. On page 49 of our agenda pack, we have a report proposing the application of the ONS Remuneration Fund for 22-23. The method of allocating the fund was agreed in 2018, so it goes back some years, with the following activities considered eligible: chairing active task groups, including standing task groups, leading rapid scrutiny exercises, vice chairing select committees that do not attract an SRA, representation on active project boards, and chairing active scrutiny panels. So as stated in the report, the number of qualifying activities and meetings reduced this year compared to last year. This is because several long-standing task groups, panels and boards concluded their work. And also, two of the more active standing groups reduced the number of meetings held in order to focus on their key priorities. And specifically, the climate emergency task group did exactly that. So we didn't hold lots of meetings, but we did a lot of work in the background. Due to the reduction in qualifying activities, allocating the full council fund this year would create an unusually high payment per meeting. As such, it's proposed to allocate only 10,400 of the fund this year, yielding a per meeting payment of £200, which is the average per meeting payment seen over the previous 4 years. So we've gone back, looked at a sort of mean average and taken that as the opportunity. The original plan was to allocate 10,000 of the fund, but 2 meetings subsequently needed to be accounted for. This was in the last week or so, in addition to address some of the annual variations seen and provide a consistent system of allocation. For future years, we recommend 220 is proposed, and that's what we applied from 23 to 24. Do we have any questions from anybody? If we don't, I can assume that we're able to note, because it'll only be to note, so I'll go to a proposal, which is to note the allocation of the ONS Remuneration Fund for 22-23 is as detailed in Appendix 1, and 2, to note that from 23-24 a cap of 220 will be placed on remuneration to eligible members per qualifying meeting. Okay, seconder, please, Chris. Well, actually, let's do it. All those. Yeah, no, it wasn't that. I was just thinking, can we actually vote? Do we? I think we just need to note it. If nobody's got any comments, we'll just note it. Is that okay? Because I think it's improper for us to be voting because so many of us will be receiving part funding from that. Okay. Moving on then to agenda item 12, which is the Management Committee Task Group update. Page 55 of the agenda pack, we have a report providing an update on the activities of task groups and other activities sitting under the Management Committee. The first one is the Evolve Programme Task Group. John, it's unusual, but John is not here. He hasn't made apologies, so something must have happened. So I would ask if we do have any questions on that, can we register them now or speak to John individually at some point? Has anybody got anything on Evolve? I don't see anything. And then we have the Financial Planning Task Group. The task group has not met since our last meeting, but its next meeting is scheduled for the 9th of June. As this is a standing task group, we must reappoint its membership this meeting. And just to note that Councillor Britton was missed from the membership in the report, but I will correct that in my proposal. Any further update from Councillor Pitt Riddell, please?
No, Chair. We haven't met. We're waiting for the period 12 figures and then Q1, but then we get busier and busier and busier. It's always the same for financial planning. We do absolutely hardly anything from March to June, and then it all kicks off from September. So I will certainly have a report once we get those figures. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your dedication as well to the role, Pip. Okay, Swindon and Wiltshire Local Enterprise Partnership. No, that's later. I'll do that in the proposals at the end, but thank you. Thank you. In a nutshell, we've had the Local Enterprise Partnership sitting waiting for us to do work with them and what have you. And I could read all this long report, but in effect, we're being asked to dissolve the LEP scrutiny. Has anybody got an issue with that at all? Oh, yeah, okay. Yes, we're all seconding that one. Yes, I get that. Okay, so that sort of takes me to proposals, if that's okay with everybody, unless there are any questions. That seemed very brief, or swift, let's say. Proposal 1, to note the update of the task group activity provided in the agenda. 2, to note the financial planning task group's forward work plan. 3, to note the disbandment of the Swindon and Wiltshire Local Enterprise Partnership, LEP, the LEP Joint Scrutiny Panel. and to reappoint the following members to the Financial Planning Task Group. Councillor Richard Britton, Councillor Gavin Grant, Gordon King, Charles McGrath, Pip Ridout, Ian Thorne, Elizabeth Threlfall and Mark Verbinnen. Is that, as you see it, Pip, as well, the right names? Yes. Yes, okay.
Obviously, Charles is not an active
Yeah.
member, but I understand that your deputy chair is happy to fill in for him.
Yeah, and we try to join all your meetings as well if we can. Okay, so our proposer for that, please. Chris, all those in favour? I'll second that. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much. Okay, forward work programme, agenda item 13. Page 63 of the agenda pack, we have the latest forward work programmes. This item is to receive updates from the chairs, vice chairs, the select committees, etc. So Councillor John Hubbard isn't here, and I don't see his vice chair here either. So again, if there's anything we need to do, we can pick that up at some later point. Johnny Kidney, Health Select, please.
Apologies, Chair. I'm having a slight technical problem here in that my laptop has unilaterally decided to update itself without my permission, so I shall work from my phone. All right. Yes, so we undertook a rapid scrutiny of NHS dental services in Wiltshire, which took place on the 29th of March. The timing of that was planned because the responsibility for the service is transferring, or has now transferred, from NHS England to the Integrated Care Board. The committee will be considering the rapid scrutiny report at our meeting in June. We recognise that the ability of NHS dental services, or the availability, should I say, of NHS dental services is a national issue. However, we anticipate the committee will want to continue to scrutinise local improvement plans going forward. We, as a committee, follow with interest the impact of delegating services such as dentistry to the local integrated care boards, and we'll be receiving reports over the next couple of months on pharmacy and optometry services, which have also transferred to the integrated care board in April, along with dental provision. Other items we're looking at in June, we'll be, as you mentioned earlier, we'll be reviewing the KPIs for adult social care and agreeing how to monitor performance. We're also receiving updates from Wiltshire Health and Care, including their long COVID service, also Avon and Wiltshire Mental Health Partnership Trust with a focus on their transformation programme and what that means for the people they are supporting. We've requested a progress report on the dementia care strategy, and the committee would like assurances on stakeholder involvement in that. Over the next few weeks, we'll be commenting on the quality accounts of health and social care providers. We've already received the accounts from the RUH in Bath and also St Salisbury NHS Foundation Trust, and these will be reviewed by the committee. The other thing to mention is the long-awaited inquiry session into pressures in urgent care. We now have a date for that. We'll be going ahead on the 19th of July. I know officers had there's a lot of important stakeholders we need to involve, and coordinating diaries is not easy, but we now have a date, 19th of July, and then we'll be discussing the findings of that at our committee in September. Although it is delayed and we'd like to have had this earlier, I think it remains very relevant to our population in Wiltshire. So I look forward to that. That's it from Health Select.
Thank you for a comprehensive update. Any questions? Yes.
Thanks, Chair. Johnny, do the dental services include Swindon?
I think they did, didn't they, Gordon? Yeah. Yes.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, I'll move then to Jerry Kunkler, Environment Select. Jerry, for an update.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the Select Committee, we haven't met since the last overview and scrutiny meeting, which was on the 21st of March. But at our next meeting on the 6th of June, we will receive further details of the Wiltshire Towns programme, which will include an update of the apps being developed as part of that programme. We will also receive an update from our Climate Emergency Task Group, chaired by your very self, Graham. There are also a number of upcoming items on our forward work plan that I would highlight. On the 25th of July, we will receive the annual review of the waste management strategy, as well as an update on passengers transport and active travel initiatives. I'd also like to bring attention that the Select Committee has agreed to set up a task group to look at the Council's housing allocation policy ahead of that being revised next year. So if you have any questions arising from Environment Select forward work programme, then I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions at all? I don't see any, so I shall move to a proposal then, which is to note the updates of Select Committee's activities and approve the overview and scrutiny forward work programme. Proposer, please. Chris, seconder. Bob, okay. All those in favour? That's fine. Thank you very much indeed. I'm now going to ask Ben to show his prowess, as it were, and put up on the screen. He's also going to add a link in the minutes to this important page, which talks about where you can look at all the scrutiny. So over to you. Okay. So where do we find that?
So it'd be library home.
Yep.
And then you'll need to go down to overview and scrutiny. And then OS forward work programs.
So you can look at any particular piece that you want that's on the
Should be
screen.
able to, yeah.
Okay, and that's visible for everybody, for us and for members of the public.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now, before I can go to the date of the next meeting, I'd just like to thank everybody for a good meeting. Thank you very much, Richard, for joining us, and Ian Blair-Pilling from the Cabinet, and to senior officers, thank you very much indeed for all your help in making sure that we deliver on scrutiny. Parvis, you missed the pothole bit, Parvis, but not to worry, we'll catch you in a minute on that one. Okay, everybody, thank you very much. Great meeting. Date of the next meeting is scheduled for 10:30 a.m. on Tuesday, the 26th of July. Meeting concluded.